The book cart's wheel caught on the uneven stone floor for the third time that morning, and Gemma didn't bother to curse. What was the point? The library's ancient flagstones had been worn smooth by centuries of feet. Alpha feet, beta feet, feet that belonged to wolves who mattered. Her omega hands would push this cart until her bones turned to dust, and no one would notice enough to care. Gemma. Lila's whisper cut through the musty silence between the shelves. Stop hiding back here. I'm not hiding. I'm working. Gemma shelved another volume, its leather binding cracked with age. The Silver Pine Pack library smelled of deteriorating paper and the particular loneliness of forgotten things. She fit right in. Lila materialized beside her, all golden confidence and beta certainty. Tonight, the summit after party, you're coming. No. I already borrowed credentials from my cousin. She's sick. Won't even notice they're gone. Lila pressed something into Gemma's palm, a security pass, still warm from her pocket. One night, that's all I'm asking. Gemma's fingers closed around the laminated card, despite every instinct screaming at her to refuse. One night to not be invisible. One night to breathe air that hadn't already been filtered through more important lungs. This is insane, she whispered, but she was already saying yes. The ballroom glittered like something from a fever dream. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across marble floors, and everywhere Gemma looked, power moved in expensive suits and glittering gowns. The scent hit her first, that overwhelming musk of dominance, layer upon layer of alpha pheromones thick enough to choke on. Her omega instincts curled inward, making her small, making her nothing. Breathe, Lila murmured, her hand steady on Gemma's elbow. You belong here. But she didn't. Every wolf in this room could smell what she was, even beneath the scent-blocking perfume Lila had doused her in. Gemma caught the sideways glances, the slight curls of lips, the way conversations paused as she passed. They knew. They always knew. She lasted 20 minutes before the walls started closing in. The garden was a mercy. Cool night air washing away the suffocating heat of too many predators in one room. Gemma's hands shook as she gripped the stone balustrade, her wolf whining softly in the back of her mind. Stupid. This whole thing was stupid. She should leave. Go back to her cramped apartment above the bakery. Go back to being invisible where at least she was safe. Parties like this are unbearable, aren't they? The voice came from the shadows beneath an ancient oak, smooth and dark as river stones. Gemma spun, her heart suddenly thundering against her ribs. He stepped into the moonlight, and something in her chest cracked open. Tall, but it wasn't his height that stole her breath. It was the way he moved, liquid power wrapped in perfect control, every step deliberate, every angle of his body designed for violence he didn't need to advertise. Dark hair fell across a face carved from something harder than flesh, and when his eyes met hers, her wolf did something it had never done before. It rose, not in submission, not in fear, in recognition. I shouldn't be here, Gemma heard herself say, the truth escaping before she could cage it. Neither should I. His smile was slight, almost sad. Yet, here we both are, hiding in gardens like children avoiding their tutors. He moved closer, and Gemma should have stepped back. Should have dropped her gaze, shown her throat, done any of the 1,000 things an Omega did when faced with a predator this dangerous. Instead, she lifted her chin. You don't seem like someone who hides from anything. You'd be surprised. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. What's your name? Does it matter? It does to me. 3 words. Just 3 words. But something in the way he said them made Gemma feel like she'd been struck by lightning, like she mattered, like her name was something worth knowing, worth keeping, worth remembering. Gemma, she whispered. It's Gemma. Gemma. He tasted her name like wine, like prayer, like something precious. Then he did something that stopped her heart entirely. He extended his hand. Not in dominance, not in command, in invitation. Walk with me? Every reasonable thought in her head screamed at her to run. This man was dangerous in ways she couldn't even define. He wore his power like a second skin, and whatever he was so far above her rank that they might as well be different species entirely. But beneath the fear, beneath the certainty that this was a terrible idea, something else whispered. Something that sounded like her wolf. Finally waking up. Something that sounded like yes. Gemma placed her hand in his, felt his fingers close around hers. Warm, solid, real. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, a spark that lit something that had been dark inside her for as long as she could remember. Yes, she said, and stepped forward into a future she couldn't possibly imagine. His smile was devastating. Then let's disappear together. They walked through shadows and silver light, her hand still tucked in his, and Gemma discovered that silence could be its own kind of conversation. He led her deeper into the garden where torchlight didn't reach, where ancient roses climbed stone walls thick with secrets. Tell me something true, he said finally, his thumb tracing absent circles against her palm. The touch should have been nothing. It felt like everything. I don't belong here. The words tumbled out, before she could stop them. I'm nobody. That's a lie. His voice held no judgment, only certainty. Try again. Gemma's throat tightened. I'm afraid, all the time, of being seen, of being invisible, of mattering too much or not at all. She laughed, sharp and broken. I'm a walking contradiction. Now that, he said softly, is true. He stopped beneath a willow tree, its branches creating a curtain between them and the world. When he turned to face her, moonlight caught the angles of his face, and Gemma saw it, the loneliness carved into every perfect line. I understand more than you know. Do you? The question came out challenging, raw. Do you know what it's like to be so small that people look right through you? I know what it's like to be so visible that no one sees you at all. His free hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered against her cheek. I know what it's like to be a symbol instead of a person, a function instead of a man. The electricity between them intensified, crackling like a storm about to break. Gemma's wolf was doing strange things in her chest, pressing forward with an urgency she'd never felt, making sounds that were almost recognition, almost home. What's your name? She whispered. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or fear. Does it matter? She recognized her own words thrown back at her, recognized the evasion for what it was. You asked for mine. I did. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his heat, smell the winter and steel scent of him beneath expensive cologne. And if I told you mine, this night would end. Everything would change. So let me have this. Just this. A few hours where I'm not what I am. Gemma should have demanded answers, should have pulled away. Instead, she rose onto her toes and kissed him. The world exploded into sensation. His arms came around her, pulling her against a body that was all controlled strength and desperate need. He kissed like a man drowning, like she was air and salvation, and the answer to questions he'd stopped asking. When his hands slid into her hair, when his mouth moved to her throat, Gemma heard herself make sounds she'd never made before. Come with me, he breathed against her skin. Please. The cottage sat at the garden's edge, half hidden by climbing ivy. Inside, a fire burned low in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across simple furniture, and a bed that suddenly seemed both too large and not nearly large enough. He closed the door. locked it, then turned to her with eyes that held a question he wouldn't voice. Gemma answered by reaching for him. They came together like something inevitable, like planets in orbit finally colliding. His hands were reverent as they learned her shape, his mouth a benediction against every inch of skin he uncovered. And when he whispered her name like prayer, when he moved inside her and looked at her like she was the only thing in existence that mattered, Gemma felt powerful for the first time in her life. After, tangled in sheets that smelled of them both, he traced her face with fingers that trembled slightly. "Extraordinary," he murmured. "You're extraordinary." "I'm not. You are." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, the corner of her mouth. "Don't argue with me. Not about this." They made love again as dawn painted the windows gray, slower this time, tender in ways that terrified her because tenderness meant this mattered. Meant this was more than one stolen night. Meant. She saw the jacket when she rose to find her scattered clothes. Saw the insignia embroidered in gold thread on midnight blue fabric, the royal crest that every citizen of the kingdom would recognize. The crowned wolf. The 3 stars. The crossed swords. Matthias Crowe. The Alpha King. Horror flooded through her in a wave so violent she nearly collapsed. The most powerful wolf in the kingdom. The ruler of 5 territories. And she was an Omega who'd led him. Gemma dressed with shaking hands, her movements mechanical while her mind screamed. He slept on, his face peaceful in a way she suspected it rarely was. And part of her wanted to memorize every detail before she ran. Before she disappeared back into her invisible life where she was safe. Then something shifted inside her chest. A golden thread, gossamer thin but impossibly strong, snapping into place between her heart and his. Warmth flooded through her, recognition, rightness, a sense of coming home she'd never experienced, the mate bond. No, 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 no. Gemma ran. Through the cottage door, through the garden, through the ballroom where the party had died into drunken remnants. The bond pulled at her with every step, trying to drag her back, but she ran faster, ran like her life depended on it, because it did. An Omega could never survive as a king's mate. The court would destroy her. The kingdom would revolt. And Matthias, he deserved a queen who could stand beside him, not a broken nothing who could barely stand at all. She ran until her lungs burned, until the bond stretched thin and screaming. She ran, even though every cell in her body begged her to turn back. Matthias woke to emptiness and the ghost of roses. For 3 heartbeats, he didn't understand. Then, the mate bond sang through him. Alive, golden, impossibly real, and he understood everything. The woman who'd been in his arms, who'd looked at him like he was just a man, who'd given herself with a trust that had shattered something in his chest, was gone. And she was his mate. He was dressed and moving before conscious thought engaged, following the pull of the bond through the garden, through the ballroom's wreckage, out into streets already buzzing with morning commerce. But the trail went cold at the city's edge, and when he tried to follow further, agony lanced through his skull. Too far. She was already too far. "Your Majesty." Marcus found him standing in the middle of the street, fists clenched, every muscle locked against the need to shift and hunt. "What happened? Find her." Matthias's voice came out wrong, more growl than words. "Gemma. Find Gemma." The search consumed him. 3 weeks of turning his kingdom inside out, of deploying guards to every territory, of lying awake while the bond pulled and ached and whispered that she was out there, alive, hurting as badly as he was. His wolf clawed at his control, demanding they hunt, demanding they claim, demanding they fix this gaping wound where their mate should be. "The council is asking questions," Marcus said carefully, watching Matthias pace his chambers like a caged animal. "Your behavior is concerning them." "I don't care about the council." Matthias hurled a crystal tumbler against the wall. It exploded into stars. Find her. We have. Marcus's voice was strange, carefully neutral. Silver Pine Pack, border territory. A librarian named Gemma Lowell. Matthias was moving before Marcus finished speaking. The Silver Pine Pack's meeting hall was small, shabby compared to the royal palace, and the alpha who greeted them looked like he might vomit from sheer terror. Good. Matthias was in no mood for politeness. Your Majesty, we had no idea you were coming. We would have prepared. Gemma Lowell. Matthias's command cracked through the air like a whip. Bring her to me. Now. The alpha's face went from white to gray. Your Majesty, I don't understand. She's just an Omega. Why would you... Omega. The word came from one of his guards, disgust dripping from every syllable. The bond in Matthias's chest roared to life, pulling so hard he almost staggered. She was close. She was here. And these fools were keeping her from him. Bring her, now. His alpha command rolled out like thunder, and wolves throughout the building dropped to their knees. The Silver Pine Alpha scrambled to obey, nearly falling over himself in his haste. Matthias forced himself to stillness, to wait, even as his wolf screamed. The bond was singing, thrumming, pulling like a rope around his heart. She was close enough to touch, close enough to... The door opened. Gemma stepped through, flanked by guards, and the mate bond exploded between them with such force that wolves gasped throughout the room. She was pale, thinner than she'd been 3 weeks ago, with shadows under her eyes that made him want to destroy everything that had ever hurt her. But her chin was up, her spine straight, and when her eyes met his, he saw the terror and the defiance burning there in equal measure. Beautiful. Fierce. His Gemma. Her name fell from his lips like benediction, like relief, like coming home. Your Majesty. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. You shouldn't have come. You ran from me. He moved forward, watching her fight the urge to step back. The bond stretched between them, visible to anyone with eyes to see, golden and impossible, and absolutely real. You're my mate, and you ran. I'm an Omega. She said it like a curse, like a confession, like a fact that should explain everything. You're the king. This... She gestured between them, at the bond singing in the air. This can't exist. It already does. Matthias stopped just outside her reach, knowing that if he touched her now, he'd never let go. His guards were staring, shock and disgust plain on their faces. The Silver Pine Alpha looked like he was witnessing the end of the world. Matthias didn't care about any of them. You feel it. I know you do. Feeling it doesn't make it possible. Tears shone in her eyes, but she blinked them back with a ferocity that made his wolf howl with pride. I won't destroy your kingdom. I won't destroy you. And I won't be destroyed for a bond neither of us asked for. No. The word was absolute final, carved from stone and will in 3 weeks of agony. Matthias let his alpha power rise, let it fill the room until the air itself felt heavy. But when he spoke, his voice was soft, meant only for her. You're already mine, Gemma. The bond chose us, and I'm not leaving without you. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He took that final step, close enough to smell her fear, and her wolf and the roses that had haunted him for 3 weeks. You think you're not enough. You're wrong. You think the kingdom matters more than you. It doesn't. You think I'll let you go to save yourself from a fight. His hand lifted, cupped her face with a gentleness that belied the command in his voice. I won't. The bond flared between them, and Gemma's breath caught. Come home with me, Matthias whispered. Please. The palace swallowed her whole. Gemma stood in the center of her new chambers. Suite, they called it, as if that made it less of a cage, and tried to remember how to breathe. Everything was too much. The ceiling soared 3 times higher than any room she'd ever lived in. The bed could sleep 5 people. Tapestries worth more than her entire life hung on walls thick enough to muffle screams. Servants had unpacked her meager belongings in silence, their eyes sliding away whenever she tried to meet them. They curtsied to empty air above her head, treating her like a ghost that happened to occupy space. Matthias had left her here with promises to return, with assurances that she'd adjust, with a tenderness in his eyes that made the mate bond pulse warm and treacherous in her chest. But the moment the door closed, the walls started closing in. 3 days. She'd survived 3 days. On the 4th, Matthias found her on the floor of her bathing chamber, knees pulled to her chest, struggling to pull air into lungs that had forgotten how to work. Gemma. He was beside her instantly, his hands careful on her shoulders. Breathe with me, in and out. The bond hummed at his touch, some of the panic receding. She hated how much better she felt with him near, hated the dependency that was being written into her bones. I can't do this, she whispered. You can. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, finding her racing pulse. You are. I'm not. I'm drowning, Matthias. Every second I'm here, I'm disappearing. Something fierce flashed in his eyes. Then we'll find you again. Together. He helped her stand, held her until her legs remembered their purpose. The council meets tomorrow. I'm announcing our bond. Horror flooded through her. No, not yet. I'm not. Ready? His smile was sad. Neither am I. But waiting won't make them more accepting. It will only give them time to plot. He cupped her face, and the bond sang between them. I need you to trust me. But trust required faith she didn't have in herself. Lady Cordelia came that evening, all cold elegance and cutting courtesy. She swept into Gemma's chambers like a winter wind, her assessment clinical and cruel. An Omega. The words dripped poison. I've served this kingdom for 30 years, and never have I seen such a catastrophic mistake. Gemma's spine straightened despite the fear. I didn't ask for this. No. You simply spread your legs for a king and expected no consequences. Cordelia's smile was a blade. You will destroy him. The council will never accept you. The kingdom will fracture. And when the dust settles, both of you will bleed. She moved to the door, paused. Do him a kindness, girl. Reject the bond. Disappear. Save him from the ruin you'll bring. The words burrowed under Gemma's skin like parasites, eating at the fragile hope she'd been trying to build. The council chamber was a cathedral of judgment. 12 wolves sat around a table carved from ancient oak, their faces ranging from skeptical to hostile. Gemma stood beside Matthias's chair, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Counselors. Matthias's voice carried absolute authority. I've called you here to announce my mate bond. Gemma Lowell of Silverpine will be my queen. The silence lasted 2 heartbeats. Then chaos erupted. An Omega? Lord Cassius surged to his feet. Your Majesty, this is madness. The bloodline, no precedent. Disgrace to the crown. She could be a concubine, someone suggested, and Gemma's stomach turned over. Keep her if you must, but the bond can be... Enough. Matthias's alpha command crashed through the room like a physical blow. Every wolf fell silent, some actually choking on their words. Let me be absolutely clear. Gemma is my mate. She will be my queen. She will be treated with the respect her position demands. His eyes scanned the table, promising violence. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. Anyone who moves against her moves against their king. Am I understood? The silence now was terrified. Several wolves nodded. Others looked mutinous. This will tear the kingdom apart, Cordelia said quietly. You're choosing 1 Omega over the stability of 5 territories. I'm choosing my mate. Matthias stood, and the power rolling off him made the air thick. And if that fractures the kingdom, then it was already broken. Gemma ran the moment they were dismissed, ran to her chambers, locked the door, and finally let herself shatter. Great heaving sobs tore from her chest, grief and fear and fury at a fate she'd never wanted. Concubine, ruin, disgrace. The words circled like vultures. The door opened anyway. Matthias using a key she didn't know he had. "No," she choked out. "Leave me alone. I can't. I know." He pulled her against his chest, and the mate bond flared so intensely it hurt. "I know it's too much. I know they're cruel. I know you didn't choose this." His arms tightened around her, and she felt him trembling too. "But I can't lose you, Gemma. I won't. They hate me." The words were muffled against his shirt. "Everyone hates me. I don't." His lips found her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth. "I don't hate you. I need you. More than I need their approval. More than I need their loyalty. More than I need anything." The bond sang between them, golden and terrible and absolutely right. Gemma lifted her face, found his mouth with hers, and let herself believe him. Just for tonight. The gown was beautiful. It was also a lie. Gemma stared at her reflection. Silk the color of moonlight, diamonds at her throat that cost more than her childhood home, hair arranged in elaborate braids that had taken 3 servants 2 hours to complete. She looked like a queen. She felt like a sacrifice. "You're stunning." Matthias appeared behind her, resplendent in ceremonial black with the royal crest embroidered in gold across his chest. When he met her eyes in the mirror, the mate bond hummed between them. "Are you ready?" "No." The truth escaped before she could cage it. "I'll never be ready for this." His hand settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. "Then we'll be unready together." The crowd stretched as far as Gemma could see. Thousands of wolves packed into the palace courtyard, their faces tilted upward toward the ceremonial platform, where she stood beside Matthias. The hostility wasn't subtle. She could taste it in the air, acrid and thick. Whispers rippled through the masses like poison through veins. Omega. Disgrace. Unworthy. The high priest's voice droned through the ancient ritual, words about destiny and sacred bonds and eternal unions. Gemma heard none of it. All her focus narrowed to Matthias beside her, to the tension in his jaw, to the way his hand gripped hers like an anchor in a storm. "Do you accept this bond?" the priest asked him. "I do." Matthias's voice carried across the courtyard, absolute and unwavering. "Now and always." "And you?" The priest turned to Gemma, and she felt the weight of thousands of eyes judging, measuring, finding her lacking. "I do." Her voice shook, but it carried. "Then let the king claim his mate." Matthias turned to her, and for a moment the crowd disappeared. There was only him, only the bond singing between them, only the inevitability of what came next. He tilted her head gently to the side, exposing the curve of her neck. His breath was warm against her skin. "Mine," he whispered, too soft for anyone else to hear. Then his canines pierced her flesh. Pain and pleasure crashed through her in equal measure, so intense her knees buckled. Matthias caught her, holding her against him while he marked her, while the mate bond exploded into something final and absolute. She felt it lock into place, a golden chain between their souls that could never be broken, never be severed, never be undone. When he pulled back, blood staining his lips, the crowd's roar was deafening. Whether approval or outrage, Gemma couldn't tell. The reception was worse than any nightmare. Alphas circled her like sharks smelling blood, their smiles sharp and their words sharper. Lady Cordelia introduced her to visiting dignitaries who looked at Gemma like something they'd scraped off their boots. An alpha from the Northern Territories kissed her hand while his mate whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. I wonder what spell she used. Surely the king hasn't fallen this far naturally. Careful. Matthias materialized beside Gemma, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. His eyes promised violence. That's your queen you're insulting. The alpha's mate paled and fled, but they kept coming. A duchess accidentally backed into Gemma, sending wine cascading down the front of her gown. A lord questioned loudly whether Omega blood would weaken any royal heirs. Someone else suggested that perhaps Matthias was suffering from a rare form of madness. Gemma endured it all with her spine straight and her head high, even as she felt herself crumbling from the inside out. The mate bond pulsed between her and Matthias, his fury bleeding through to her, making her own rage burn hotter. You're doing beautifully, he murmured against her ear during a brief moment alone. I'm so proud. The servant approached with a silver tray bearing 2 crystal glasses. Wine, your majesties? Matthias reached for one, then froze. His nostrils flared. In one fluid motion, he knocked the tray from the servant's hands. Glass shattered. Dark red wine spread across marble floors like blood. Guards! His roar shook the foundations. Seize him! Chaos erupted. The servant tried to run. Royal guards descended, forcing him to his knees. Guests screamed and scattered. And Matthias pulled Gemma against his chest with a force that drove the air from her lungs, his whole body shaking with barely restrained violence. Wolfsbane, he growled. In the wine. Enough to kill her twice over. Horror flooded through Gemma. Someone had tried to poison her. Someone had tried to murder her at her own claiming ceremony, in front of thousands of witnesses, and they'd nearly succeeded. Who sent you? Matthias's alpha command was so powerful the servant's nose started bleeding. Tell me. The Northern Alliance, the man choked out. They said an Omega Queen would destroy us all. Said killing her was saving the kingdom. Matthias's fist connected with the man's jaw with a crack that made Gemma flinch. Guards dragged the unconscious servant away while Matthias issued orders in a voice that promised executions and war. Then he turned back to her, and the fury in his eyes made her wolf whimper. You're not leaving my sight. Not tonight. Not ever again. He carried her from the reception, ignoring protests and propriety, taking her straight to his chambers. Inside, he checked her for injuries with hands that trembled. His wolf so close to the surface his eyes had gone gold. I'm fine, Gemma whispered, even though she was shaking. Matthias, You almost died? He cupped her face and she saw her own terror reflected in his eyes. They tried to take you from me, and His voice broke. I can't lose you, Gemma. I won't survive it. He kissed her then, desperate and possessive, claiming her mouth like he'd claimed her body, her soul, her future. And Gemma kissed him back even as a terrible realization crystallized in her mind. The arrow missed her head by 3 inches. Gemma felt the wind of its passage, heard the thunk as it buried itself in the oak tree behind her, and understood with perfect clarity that she was supposed to be dead. Around her, the royal hunting party erupted into chaos, shouts, wolves shifting, guards converging. But all she could do was stare at the quivering arrow shaft and feel nothing at all. 2 months. 2 months of constant attempts on her life, and she'd stopped being afraid. Fear required the belief that survival mattered. An accident, Your Majesty. The huntmaster stammered to Matthias, whose fury had turned the air itself dangerous. A terrible accident. The archer swears he didn't see. Execute him. Matthias's voice was flat, final. Slowly. That night, Gemma found her wardrobe destroyed. Every gown shredded, expensive fabrics reduced to ribbons. The servants swore they'd seen nothing. The next day, her schedule was accidentally changed, causing her to miss a diplomatic reception. She arrived an hour late to find visiting dignitaries already gone, and courtiers whispering about her incompetence. The Omega Queen can't even manage a calendar, someone murmured, not quite quietly enough. Matthias executed 3 more servants that week. Gemma stopped sleeping. She was crossing the portrait gallery when she heard voices behind closed doors. Matthias's private council chamber. She should have kept walking. Instead, she pressed closer. Cancel all her public appearances, Matthias was saying. No more ceremonies, no more receptions. She stays in the palace where I can protect her. Your Majesty, Marcus's careful voice replied. That will only make things worse. The court already sees her as weak. I don't care what the court sees. Something shattered. They're trying to kill her. Every day, some new attempt. If hiding her saves her life, then she stays hidden. You're making her invisible again, another voice argued. The very thing she ran from. She's alive. That's all that matters. Gemma's hands clenched until her nails drew blood. Alive. She was alive the same way a bird in a cage was alive. Breathing, technically, but not living. Not really. She was waiting in his chambers when he returned that evening, fury burning away the numbness that had consumed her for weeks. You're canceling my duties. Not a question. Matthias stopped, surprise flickering across his face before his expression hardened. For your safety, yes. No. The word came out stronger than she'd meant it. You don't get to do this. I'm your mate and your king. I get to keep you alive. By making me nothing? Gemma surged to her feet. By hiding me away like a shameful secret? That's not protection, Matthias. That's erasure. That's making me small again, and I won't. You almost died today. His roar shook the windows. That arrow was meant for your skull. The poison last week, the accident with the stairs, the fire in your chambers. How many more times do I have to watch you nearly die before you understand that your life is more important than your pride? This isn't about pride. This is about existing as something more than your possession. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Every time you lock me away, every time you fight my battles, every time you make me invisible to keep me safe, you prove them right, that I'm weak, that I don't belong, that an Omega can never be queen. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You love me so much you're suffocating me. The truth hung between them, sharp and terrible. And I'm letting you. I'm disappearing all over again, and this time I can't even blame them. I'm doing it to myself. Gemma. No. She moved toward the door. I can't do this anymore. I'm ordering you to stay. His alpha command pressed against her, trying to force obedience. Gemma looked back at him, and something in her expression made him flinch. Then I guess I'm disobeying my king. She walked out. The palace at night was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Gemma wandered through corridors she'd never seen, past rooms whose purposes she couldn't guess, driven by fury and desperation in equal measure. She was lost, physically, emotionally, spiritually lost, when she heard the sound of steel on steel. The training yard was lit by torches, and a lone figure moved through combat forms with lethal grace. A woman, tall and muscular, moving like violence, was a language she spoke fluently. You train late, Gemma said, stepping into the light. The woman spun, blade raised, then lowered it slowly. Your Majesty, you shouldn't be out here alone. Elena, isn't it? Royal Guard? Gemma had seen her during the assassination attempts, always the first to move, the fastest to react. I'm tired of being told where I should and shouldn't be. Something shifted in Elena's expression. Assessment becoming respect. Then maybe you're finally ready to stop being a victim. Excuse me? You want to survive this court? Stop waiting for your mate to save you. Elena tossed her a practice blade. Learn to save yourself. Over the following weeks, they trained in secret. Combat at night in empty yards, court politics whispered in shadowed alcoves, Elena was brutal and honest, pulling no punches. Your Omega empathy? Stop seeing it as weakness. You can read people better than any alpha in this palace. Use it. Gemma started attending council meetings again, but this time she watched. Noticed who aligned with whom, saw the power plays beneath polite words. When Lord Cassius suggested a trade agreement that would hurt border towns, she spoke up. Quietly, carefully, using facts Elena had helped her research. The council stared. Matthias looked stunned. The agreement was revised. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Gemma stopped shrinking in rooms, started meeting eyes instead of dropping her gaze, used her ability to sense emotion to build alliances with unlikely wolves, the ones dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. The ones like her. She was finding her roar. Finally. The winter conclave assembled like a gathering of storms. Every territorial alpha filled the grand hall, power crackling in the air thick enough to choke on. Gemma stood beside Matthias on the dais, wearing armor disguised as a gown, Elena's training echoing in her bones. She'd earned this position through blood and compromise, through late nights building alliances and early mornings proving she wouldn't break. She refused to break now. Brothers and sisters of the crown. Lord Dimitri's voice carried across the hall, smooth as poisoned honey. He was massive, silver-haired, with eyes like chips of ice. We gather today to address a crisis that threatens our very foundation. Matthias's hand found Gemma's beneath the table, squeezing once. Warning or reassurance, she couldn't tell. For months, our kingdom has suffered, Dimitri continued. Assassination attempts, instability, weakness at the highest level. And why? His gaze locked on Gemma. Because our king chose sentiment over strength, chose an Omega over his duty. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gemma felt the mate bond pulse with Matthias's rising fury. I've served this kingdom for 40 years, Dimitri said. Watched it flourish under strong leadership. But now, he turned to Matthias. Now I watch it crumble because you cannot see past your own desires. The assassination attempts, the sabotage, the rumors, all symptoms of a deeper rot. A king who puts one Omega above the stability of 5 territories is unfit to rule. Careful, Dimitri. Matthias's voice was deadly quiet. You're approaching treason. Am I? Dimitri smiled. Or am I speaking the truth every wolf in this room is thinking? Your mate makes you weak. She makes the crown weak. And weakness invites chaos. He paused, letting the words sink in. I challenge you, Matthias Crowe. For the crown. For the kingdom. Let the old laws decide who deserves to lead. The hall erupted. Shouts of approval, cries of outrage, the scrape of chairs as wolves leapt to their feet. But beneath the chaos, Gemma heard something else, the careful orchestration of it all. Dimitri's supporters were positioned perfectly, their responses too coordinated to be spontaneous. You orchestrated it, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Every eye turned to her. The assassination attempts, the sabotage, all of it. You've been destabilizing the kingdom yourself to prove it's unstable. Dimitri's smile widened. Clever little Omega. But does it matter? The damage is done. The kingdom sees weakness, regardless of who caused it. He turned back to Matthias. What say you, Your Majesty? Will you accept my challenge? Or will you prove me right and hide behind excuses? Matthias stood, and the temperature in the room plummeted. I accept. Name your terms. Traditional combat. First blood wins the crown. Dimitri's eyes glittered. And according to ancient law, if you fall, your mate dies with you. The bond demands it. Horror flooded through Gemma, but she forced her face to remain calm. She'd known this was coming. Elena had warned her about the old laws, the brutal traditions that still governed succession challenges. Then let's not waste time, Matthias said. The combat ring was ancient stone, etched with runes that predated the kingdom itself. Gemma stood at the edge with the other witnesses, her heart hammering against her ribs as Matthias and Dmitri circled each other. Both had shifted partially, claws extended, canines elongated, eyes burning with their wolves' fury. They came together like thunder. The fight was brutal, savage, everything Gemma had feared. Dmitri was older, more experienced, fighting with the cunning of decades. But Matthias was faster, stronger, driven by fury and the desperate need to protect his mate. Blood sprayed across stone, bones cracked. The crowd roared. Then Dmitri feinted left, struck right, and his claws tore through Matthias's side. Gemma felt the pain through the mate bond, felt Matthias stumble, felt his strength faltering. No, not like this. Not when she'd finally found herself, finally found her strength. She wouldn't watch him die, wouldn't let Dmitri win. She stepped into the ring. "What are you doing?" Elena hissed, grabbing for her. "You'll be killed." But Gemma was already moving. The crowd's shock hit her like a wave, but she ignored it. Ignored everything except Matthias bleeding on the ground and the mate bond singing between them, golden and desperate and absolutely alive. She reached him, dropped to her knees, and placed her hands on his chest. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm right here." The mate bond exploded. Gemma had spent months seeing her Omega abilities as weakness. The empathy, the connection, the way she felt everything too deeply. But now, channeling her strength through the bond to Matthias, she understood. This wasn't weakness. This was power that alphas couldn't comprehend. The power to share, to connect, to fight as one instead of alone. Matthias's eyes snapped open, burning gold. He rose with Gemma, and together they faced Dmitri. "Impossible," Dmitri breathed. "She can't, Omegas don't." They moved as one. Matthias struck high while Gemma anticipated Dmitri's counter, pulling Matthias aside at the exact right moment. She felt every thought through the bond, knew his intentions before he acted, matched his movements with precision that came from something deeper than training. When Dmitri lunged for Matthias's throat, Gemma was there first. Her blade, Elena's blade, hidden in the folds of her gown, found the gap in his defenses. She drove it home with all the strength of an Omega who'd been underestimated her entire life. Dmitri fell. Silence crashed over the hall. Gemma stood over Dmitri's body, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't all his. Beside her, Matthias stared at her with something like awe. She turned to face the assembled alphas, these wolves who'd dismissed her, mocked her, tried to kill her, raised her voice, and let it carry. "You want to know what strength is? It's not dominance. It's not cruelty. It's not ruling through fear." She met their eyes, one by one. Strength is surviving when everyone wants you dead. Strength is standing when they've beaten you down. Strength is compassion in a world that calls it weakness. Her voice hardened. "I didn't ask to be your queen, but I am. And I will be a queen on my own terms, or I won't be one at all." No one spoke. No one moved. Then, slowly, Elena dropped to one knee. Others followed. The dismissed, the overlooked. The ones who'd been waiting for someone to prove that power could look different. Within minutes, half the hall knelt. It was enough. That night, in chambers finally feeling like home, Matthias traced the mark on her neck. His claiming bite, now a symbol of something they'd built together. "Equal partners?" he murmured. Gemma smiled. "Always." The mate bond settled between them, no longer painful but complete. They'd rewritten every rule, broken every tradition, survived every attempt to tear them apart, and they'd do it again tomorrow and every day after. A king and queen who chose each other, despite everything, because of everything.